Hello everyone, welcome. From red carpets to courtroom drama, Darcy Silva and Georgie Rusev's relationship was never ordinary. What began as a fast-moving romance on 90 Day Fiancé slowly turned into betrayal, heartbreak, and scandal. What really happened behind the scenes was far darker than what viewers ever saw. This is a story of secret affairs, hidden money, emotional breakdowns, and life-changing decisions. This isn't just reality TV. This is reality. For 10 months, Darcy Silva was secretly involved in a romantic relationship with a banker named Thomas. What began quietly soon became serious. When Thomas learned about Darcy's financial problems, he promised to take responsibility for her hidden debt, which totaled $570,000. Their bond grew stronger. They spent time together at luxury hotels, away from the public eye. Not long after, Darcy discovered she was pregnant. Medical tests confirmed that the child was Thomas's. When Georgi Rusev found out, he was devastated. The news caused intense arguments and emotional chaos. Eventually, Darcy decided to divorce Georgie. She made her position clear, saying she only wanted to be with Thomas. Unable to cope with the betrayal, Georgie attempted suicide. Later, he accused Darcy of stealing $450,000 from his savings and giving the money to Thomas. The case went to court. After a long hearing, the court ruled that Georgie's accusations were true. Darcy Silva was sentenced to 5 months in prison. Now, Georgi Rusev has decided to move on with his life. He plans to get married again. To understand how everything fell apart, we need to go back to the beginning. Darcy Silva had always drawn attention. With her platinum blonde hair, designer clothes, and emotional openness, she became a standout on reality television. From 90 Day Fiancé to her spin-off Darcy and Stacey, viewers watched her search for love, often ending in heartbreak. Then she met Georgi Rusev. He was tall, quiet, and reserved. A Bulgarian massage therapist living in the U.S., Georgi seemed different from Darcy's past partners. He was calmer and less flashy. Darcy believed he could offer her stability and real love. Georgie was drawn to her ambition and emotional nature. Their relationship moved quickly. Within months, they were engaged. Fans were divided. Some believed Georgie balanced Darcy. Others questioned his intentions. But Darcy was fully committed. She posted about him constantly, calling him her forever. Behind the scenes, problems were already forming. Georgie struggled with Darcy's need for constant reassurance. Darcy, shaped by past betrayals, became suspicious of Georgie's quiet personality. They argued about money, trust, and Georgie's unwillingness to open up emotionally. They broke up and reunited multiple times. Each reunion felt hopeful. Each breakup left deeper scars. Their relationship became a cycle of hope and disappointment. When filming stopped, Darcy made a decision that changed everything. She met Thomas, but before that, Darcy was already emotionally vulnerable. Her relationship with Georgie reflected her deepest fears. When that connection cracked, she looked elsewhere for comfort. To the public, Darcy and Georgie looked happy. Their social media showed love and laughter. On Darcy and Stacey, fans hoped Darcy had finally found the one. But off camera, the relationship was falling apart. Georgie avoided confrontation and preferred silence. Darcy needed emotional closeness and reassurance. She wanted honesty and trust. That difference created distance. Darcy noticed Georgie disappearing for hours. His phone was always face down. When she asked about money, he became defensive. Rumors began to spread that he was hiding finances or talking to his ex-wife. Darcy's insecurity grew. Their arguments became public. On one episode, Darcy begged Georgie to open up emotionally. He remained silent. Viewers watched her cry, frustrated and hurt. His calm attitude made people question his intentions. Privately, Darcy told friends she felt alone. She wanted marriage, children, and a future. Georgie wanted space. Their goals no longer matched. Money made things worse. Darcy had invested heavily in her fashion brand, House of 11, and her expenses kept growing. Georgie was unclear about his income. When Darcy asked for help with her debt, he refused. Later, she said that moment changed everything. That was when Thomas entered her life. Thomas wasn't just a banker. He listened. He asked about her dreams and fears. He didn't judge her fame. He saw her as a person. Most importantly, he offered something Georgie never did: stability. The relationship started quietly. Text messages turned into coffee dates. Coffee dates became weekend trips. Thomas soon became the center of Darcy's emotional world. She stopped responding to Georgie. She canceled therapy. She stayed away from home. When Georgie confronted her, Darcy had already made her choice. She was done waiting for him to change. While Darcy and Georgie's relationship was breaking down publicly, her relationship with Thomas grew in private. They met at a charity event in New York. Surrounded by glamour, Darcy attended alone, emotionally exhausted. Thomas approached her and simply asked if she was okay. That moment stayed with her. He didn't seek attention. He didn't talk about TV. He listened. They began meeting quietly. Darcy felt understood. Thomas talked about the future, stability, and building something real. She shared her stress, her relationship struggles, and the pressure of keeping up appearances. One night at a rooftop restaurant, Darcy broke down and admitted the truth. She was buried under $570,000 in debt. She expected judgment. Instead, Thomas offered help. He told her he would take care of it. Soon after, he began paying it off quietly. They spent weekends in luxury hotels, far from cameras. Thomas introduced her to his professional circle. Darcy felt like she had stepped into a new life, but she kept secrets. Georgie knew nothing about Thomas, the money, or the hotel stays. Darcy was living two lives. As her bond with Thomas grew stronger, her connection with Georgie faded. She skipped filming. She pulled away from her brand and public image. Thomas became her escape. Then, just when things seemed settled, Darcy received news that changed everything. Her glamorous lifestyle had hidden years of financial trouble. And now, only Thomas knew the full truth. One night in Miami, sitting in a hotel suite, Darcy finally admitted how deep the problem was. She was drowning in debt. $570,000. And that confession set off a chain of events that would destroy lives, end marriages, and change everything forever. To be exact. The debt came from unpaid business loans, personal credit cards, and legal fees from past relationships. Darcy had kept it hidden from Georgie, from her family, and even from her twin sister, Stacy. The weight of it was crushing her. Thomas didn't flinch. He didn't judge. He simply asked, "How much do you need to breathe again?" Darcy was stunned. No one had ever offered her help without conditions. For years, she had been the provider, the fixer, the one holding everything together. Now, someone was offering to hold her. Within days, Thomas began making payments. Quietly and carefully, he contacted her creditors, negotiated settlements, and wired money. Darcy watched in disbelief as the massive debt slowly began to shrink. For the first time in years, she felt hope. Their relationship deepened. Thomas was no longer just a lover. He became her financial lifeline. They traveled together, stayed in luxury resorts, and talked about a future beyond the chaos. Darcy began imagining a life without cameras, without drama, just peace. But secrets have consequences. Darcy still hadn't told Georgie. He believed they were working on their relationship. He had no idea she was spending nights with another man, or that someone else was paying off her debts. The lie grew heavier every day. Darcy tried to justify it. Georgie had refused to help. He had pulled away emotionally and financially. Thomas had stepped in without hesitation. She told herself it wasn't betrayal. It was survival. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was building a new life on the ruins of the old one. And eventually, Georgie would find out. For now, Darcy felt light. The debt was lifting. Her heart was healing. And Thomas was by her side, promising more than money. He was promising forever. Darcy Silva was living two lives. In one, she was the reality TV star trying to save a broken relationship with Georgi Rusev. In the other, she was quietly building a new future with Thomas, the banker who had rescued her from financial collapse. Nothing prepared her for what came next. It started with exhaustion. Darcy felt dizzy, drained, and emotionally unbalanced. At first, she blamed stress, guilt, and the pressure of hiding her affair. But when the symptoms didn't stop, she went to see a doctor. The results were clear. Darcy was pregnant. She stared at the test results in shock. At 50, she never expected this. Her mind raced. Could it be Georgie's? No. They hadn't been intimate in months. There was only one possibility. Thomas. She called him immediately. He was quiet for a moment, then said calmly, "We'll figure this out together." He didn't panic. He didn't run. Thomas booked a private appointment with a top OB/GYN in Manhattan. The DNA test confirmed it. The baby was his. Darcy was overwhelmed. Fear, joy, and uncertainty collided. After years of heartbreak and rebuilding herself, she was carrying a child. A symbol of new beginnings, but also a ticking time bomb. Because Georgie didn't know, Darcy considered telling him. She practiced the conversation in her head. The confession, the tears, the fallout. But before she could speak, the truth came out another way. A mutual friend had seen Darcy and Thomas at a prenatal clinic. The information spread quickly. Within days, Georgie confronted her. "What's going on?" he asked. "Are you pregnant?" Darcy froze, then nodded. Georgie's face fell. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood there, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Darcy cheated, she was carrying another man's child. The argument turned ugly. Georgie demanded answers. Darcy tried to explain, but her words meant nothing. The man who once promised her forever was now broken, angry, and lost. That night, Georgie packed his things and left. Darcy watched him go, one hand on her stomach, her heart heavy with regret. She had chosen Thomas. She had chosen a new life. But the cost was enormous, and the consequences were just beginning. The silence between Darcy and Georgie was unbearable. After the pregnancy revelation, Georgie disappeared. No calls, no messages, no closure. What was once a passionate and messy love story had collapsed into emotional wreckage. Darcy tried to move forward. She focused on her pregnancy, leaned on Thomas, and avoided the media storm. But the truth haunted her. She knew she had shattered Georgie's heart. Meanwhile, Georgie was falling apart. Friends described him as completely broken. He stopped working. He stopped eating. He isolated himself in his apartment, curtains closed, phone turned off. The betrayal destroyed him. He had believed in Darcy, defended her, stood by her through public criticism, and now she was carrying another man's child. The final blow came when Darcy served him divorce papers. There was no conversation, just a legal envelope left at his door with a note that read, "I'm sorry. I only want to marry Thomas." Georgie didn't cry. He didn't scream. He stared at the paper, numb. The woman he had called his soulmate was gone. The divorce moved quickly. Darcy's lawyers pushed for a clean break. No shared assets. No contact. Georgie didn't fight it. He signed the papers in silence. Months later, in a rare interview, Georgie admitted, "I didn't just lose my partner. I lost myself." He spoke about sleepless nights, panic attacks, and deep betrayal. He had given Darcy everything. His love, his trust, his future. And he felt discarded. Darcy stayed quiet. Publicly, she focused on her pregnancy and her relationship with Thomas. Privately, she struggled with guilt. She never meant to hurt Georgie, but she knew she couldn't go back. The divorce was finalized in less than 3 months. No announcements, no statements, just a quiet ending to a very public love story. But it wasn't over, because Georgie was about to make a shocking accusation. One that would pull Darcy back into the spotlight, not as a reality star, but as a defendant. And this time there would be no cameras, only a courtroom. The news of Darcy's pregnancy hit Georgie like a tidal wave. It wasn't just betrayal. It was confirmation that the future he dreamed of was gone forever. Georgie withdrew completely. Calls went unanswered. Messages were left unread. He disappeared from social media, stopped showing up to work, and canceled all public appearances. The man who once stood beside Darcy on red carpets now lived in silence and shadows. And his breaking point was approaching. After everything that had happened, the world moved on faster than either of them expected. New scandals replaced old ones. New faces filled the headlines. Darcy Silva's name slowly faded from the daily news cycle, but the consequences of her choices stayed with her. When she returned to the outside world, nothing felt familiar. The attention she once craved now felt dangerous. Cameras no longer felt flattering. They felt exposing. Darcy focused on survival. She moved quietly, avoiding public events and limiting contact with former friends. The fashion brand that once defined her identity struggled to recover. Investors pulled back. Partnerships disappeared. Trust, once broken publicly, was difficult to rebuild. Motherhood changed her in ways she hadn't expected. Caring for her child forced Darcy to slow down. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't chasing love, fame, or validation. She was present. The silence she once feared became necessary. Late nights alone gave her time to reflect on patterns she had repeated for decades. She began therapy, not for the cameras, not for public redemption, but because she couldn't carry the weight anymore. In those sessions, Darcy confronted truths she had long avoided. Her fear of abandonment, her need to be saved, her tendency to confuse attention with love. She started to understand that Thomas hadn't rescued her. He had distracted her. The stability she thought he offered was temporary, built on secrecy and escape. When real consequences arrived, he disappeared. That realization hurt more than the breakup with Georgie. It forced Darcy to accept that no one was coming to save her. She had to save herself. Meanwhile, Georgie continued rebuilding his life step by step. Recovery wasn't linear. There were days when memories surfaced without warning. Songs, places, certain phrases. But he no longer ran from the pain. He faced it. Therapy taught him how to separate his worth from the betrayal. He stopped asking why Darcy did what she did. Instead, he asked why he had ignored the warning signs. Georgie learned to trust himself again. He learned that silence wasn't strength and that emotional openness didn't make him weak. Slowly, he began to feel like a person again, not a headline or a victim. The woman he eventually met didn't know him from television. She didn't care about the past. She knew him as he was now, quieter, wiser, more grounded. Their relationship wasn't dramatic. There were no grand gestures, no public declarations, just consistency. When Georgie proposed, it wasn't filmed. It wasn't announced. It happened in private, exactly the way he wanted. For the first time, his future felt safe. As the years passed, the story took on a different meaning for those watching from the outside. What once seemed like entertainment now felt uncomfortable. Fans who had cheered for the drama began to question the cost of constant exposure. Reality television blurred lines between storytelling and real pain, and Darcy and Georgie became examples of what happens when those lines disappear. Darcy eventually spoke publicly again, but carefully. In a rare interview, she didn't defend herself. She didn't shift blame. She spoke about accountability, about how fear had guided her decisions, and how secrecy destroyed everything it touched. She admitted that love couldn't grow where honesty didn't exist. She didn't mention Georgie by name. She didn't need to. The apology wasn't for forgiveness. It was for closure. Georgie watched the interview quietly. He didn't react publicly, but those close to him said it helped. Not because it erased the past, but because it acknowledged it. That acknowledgement mattered. Time softened what anger never could. Darcy never returned to reality television in the same way. The industry had moved on, and so had she. The desire for constant validation no longer controlled her. She chose a smaller life, a quieter one built around responsibility rather than fantasy. There were days she missed the excitement, the attention, the applause. But those moments passed. What remained was clarity. She understood now that love built on escape will always collapse. Georgie, on the other hand, found strength in rebuilding publicly nothing. His life didn't need an audience anymore. Happiness didn't need proof. Years later, when asked in an interview what he had learned, Georgie answered simply, "Love should feel safe. If it doesn't, it's not love." That sentence stayed with people. The story of Darcy Silva and Georgie Rusev was no longer about betrayal alone. It became a lesson about boundaries, about emotional responsibility, and about the danger of ignoring pain instead of healing it. What started as a televised romance ended as a private reckoning. No winners, no villains, just consequences. Darcy learned that shortcuts to peace only lead to longer paths of regret. Georgie learned that survival can look like starting over, even when you didn't choose the ending. And the world learned something too. Behind every dramatic storyline are real lives, real wounds, and moments that can't be edited, res hot, or undone. Because when the cameras stop rolling, reality doesn't fade to black. It keeps going,